What would you do if you were told to bow before an idol, or be burned alive? Would you compromise just a little to save your life, or would you stand firm, even if it cost you everything? This is not a fairy tale or a legend. It is a real story, recorded in the book of Daniel, where 3 young men faced the greatest test of faith anyone could imagine. Picture it: Babylon, the most powerful empire of its day. A king, Nebuchadnezzar, has just erected a massive golden statue, 90 feet high, gleaming in the desert sun. At the sound of the trumpet, everyone is commanded to bow. Thousands fall to their knees. Dust rises, music plays, fear spreads. But in the midst of the crowd, 3 figures remain standing. They refuse to bow. They refuse to compromise. They refuse to betray their God. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Names that echo through history as the very definition of courage and conviction. They were young, exiled from their homeland, living under foreign rule. They could have blended in, bowed down like everyone else, and nobody would have blamed them. But their loyalty to God was not for sale, not for comfort, not even for survival. And because of their refusal, they were thrown into a furnace so hot it killed the soldiers who carried them. Yet, instead of being consumed by flames, something unimaginable happened inside that furnace, something so shocking that even the king himself was left trembling. Their story is more than history. It is prophecy. It is a mirror, reflecting the challenges believers face today when pressured to compromise their values, their integrity, or their faith. When the world says, "Bow down," this story asks, "Will you stand up?" As we walk through this incredible account, keep asking yourself, if I were standing on that plain of Babylon, what choice would I make? And if this story stirs something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Speak it. Let's spread the reminder that faith, true faith, stands firm even in the fire. Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. The story begins with a king whose pride reached the heavens. Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of Babylon, had conquered nations, enslaved peoples, and built a kingdom of unmatched glory. But for him, conquest was not enough. He demanded worship. He ordered a golden image 90 feet high and 9 feet wide to be erected on the plain of Dura, an image so massive that when the sun struck its surface, it blazed like fire across the horizon. This was no ordinary statue. It was more than art, more than politics. It was Nebuchadnezzar's declaration that he himself was above every god, every kingdom, every rival. And then came his decree. At the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and all kinds of music, every nation and tongue must bow before the golden image. Whoever refuses will be cast immediately into the burning fiery furnace. Imagine the scene. People from every nation and language under Babylon's rule gathered together, a sea of humanity standing before this colossal monument of pride. The musicians raised their instruments, the air filled with sound, and at once, thousands dropped to their knees, foreheads pressed to the dirt. The king's power was absolute. No one dared resist. Or so he thought. Because in the midst of this overwhelming crowd, 3 young Hebrew men remained standing. Their silhouettes stood out like dark flames against a sea of bent backs. They did not move. They did not bow. Their hearts beat with the fear of God, not of men. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They knew the cost of defiance. They could feel the eyes of the officials burning into them. They could sense the whispers spreading through the crowd. Yet they refused to bow, because their allegiance was not to Babylon's king but to the King of Kings. And that act of defiance set the stage for one of the most powerful demonstrations of God's deliverance ever recorded in Scripture. Now pause here. If you had been there, surrounded by a sea of bowing people, would you have had the courage to remain standing? Would your knees have buckled under the pressure, or would your faith have held you upright? If you believe faith must stand firm in the face of compromise, type it in the comments, "I will not bow." The bold refusal. The whispers quickly reached the ears of the Chaldean officials, men who burned with envy against the Hebrews. With malicious delight, they hurried to King Nebuchadnezzar and accused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "O king, live forever. You have made a decree that every man must bow before the image when they hear the sound of music. Yet these men, whom you have set over the affairs of Babylon, have not regarded you. They do not serve your gods, nor do they bow before your golden image." Fury ignited in Nebuchadnezzar's heart. How could anyone, especially foreigners he had elevated to power, dare defy his command? Immediately, he ordered the 3 men to be brought before him. The entire court turned to watch as the Hebrews stood before the most powerful ruler on earth. The king's voice thundered, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up? I will give you one more chance. When you hear the music again, bow down, and all will be well. But if you refuse, you will be cast this very hour into the fiery furnace. And what God can deliver you from my hand?" The entire hall fell silent. The music stopped. Even the sound of breathing seemed heavy. Everyone waited to see if the Hebrews would cave to fear, if their knees would bend to save their lives. But then came their reply, words so bold, so fearless, that they echo through time. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer you in this matter. The God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image you have set up." Their answer struck like lightning. They declared their faith not only in God's ability to save, but in his sovereignty, even if salvation did not come. This was not just faith, it was unshakable loyalty. Their lives meant less to them than their devotion to the God of Israel. Can you imagine their courage? They were young men, standing before a furnace hot enough to melt iron, facing a king whose word was law. And yet, they stood unmoved. They would rather burn in fire than bow to falsehood. Now let me ask you, how many of us today compromise our faith for far less? For a paycheck? For acceptance? For comfort? These men risked their very lives and declared, "Even if God doesn't deliver, we still won't bow." That is the essence of true faith. Faith that trusts God's power but also submits to his will. Faith that does not bargain for miracles, but surrenders to his lordship. Faith that refuses to bow. The furnace heated 7 times hotter. Nebuchadnezzar's face twisted with rage. The audacity of these young Hebrews, defying his decree, challenging his authority, and refusing to tremble before the threat of death, was more than his pride could bear. His voice roared like thunder in the hall. "Heat the furnace 7 times hotter than it is usually heated." The command was irrational, but rage often blinds reason. The furnace, already a tool of death, was now turned into a monstrous blaze, its flames leaping and writhing like hungry beasts. The heat was so intense that even those standing at a distance could feel their skin sting. The crackling of fire echoed through the air, and a terrifying glow painted the sky red. Mighty men of Valor, the strongest of Babylon's army, were summoned to bind the Hebrews. Rope was tied around their hands and feet, but notice, their mouths were never gagged. They had already spoken their declaration of faith, and nothing could silence it. The soldiers marched them closer to the furnace. The ground trembled with fear. Spectators gasped, perhaps secretly hoping the men would recant at the last moment. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked steadily forward, their eyes lifted not toward the flames, but toward heaven. The heat was unbearable. The soldiers, though armored and strong, began to weaken. Scripture tells us that as they threw the Hebrews into the furnace, the fire's fury leapt out and consumed those very soldiers, killing them instantly. Think of that. The fire meant for the faithful first devoured the faithless. Even before the Hebrews were touched by the flames, God was already showing his power. And so, bound in ropes, the three men fell into the fiery furnace. The flames raged, the heat blazed, and the king leaned forward to see their destruction. But what Nebuchadnezzar saw next would shake the empire, challenge the gods of Babylon, and leave a testimony that would be preached for generations. Pause for a moment. This is often how faith is tested. The furnace may look like it's the end, but sometimes God allows us to be thrown into it, not to destroy us, but to display his glory. Your fiery trial may be the very stage upon which God shows his greatest miracle in your life. The miracle in the fire, the fourth man appears. The silence was unbearable. Every eye in Babylon was fixed on the furnace, expecting screams of agony and the smell of burning flesh. But instead of cries, there was only the roar of fire, and then something beyond comprehension. Nebuchadnezzar's jaw dropped. He stood up in alarm, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" he asked his counselors. His officials, just as stunned, answered, "True, O king." And then came the words that echo through eternity. "Look, I see 4 men, loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Daniel 3 verses 24 to 25. Imagine the scene. The ropes that bound them had burned away, but their garments were untouched. The flames that killed the strongest soldiers could not even singe their hair. Instead of writhing in pain, they walked freely in the furnace, as though it had become a holy sanctuary. But the most extraordinary sight was the 4th man. Radiant, otherworldly, cloaked in divine light. Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king, could not deny his presence. Whether he recognized him as an angel or the very pre-incarnate Christ, one thing was certain: the fire revealed a supernatural deliverer. Think about this. God did not put out the fire. He did not stop them from being thrown in. He let them fall into the flames, but then he joined them inside it. This is the heart of the miracle. God doesn't always remove the furnace, but he promises his presence within it. As Isaiah 43 verse 2 declares, "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you." The spectators were frozen in awe. What should have been the end of 3 faithful men became a sermon no priest or prophet could have preached. The furnace turned into a pulpit, and the fire became the backdrop of God's glory. Picture it: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego conversing with the divine figure, unharmed, fearless, shining with the confidence that no flame could consume them. Every eye witnessed the undeniable truth: there is a power greater than Babylon, greater than kings, and greater than fire. This is the essence of unshakable faith. You may face the furnace, but you are never alone in it. The 4th man is still walking in fires today. He walks with the broken-hearted, with the persecuted, with those standing for righteousness when it cost them everything. And the lesson resounds through the ages: what bound them was burned away, but what mattered most was preserved. Sometimes God allows the fire not to destroy you, but to consume the chains that hold you back. What we've witnessed in this story is more than just history. It's prophecy, it's encouragement, it's a mirror of our own lives. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were ordinary young men, captives in a foreign land, facing impossible odds. Yet their faith turned their furnace into a testimony that still speaks thousands of years later. The furnace of Babylon is not so different from the world we live in today. We are surrounded by golden statues, modern idols of money, fame, compromise, and comfort, demanding that we bow. The fire is still heated, not with flames of coal, but with pressures of culture, rejection, and fear. But just as in Babylon, God is still looking for men and women who will stand tall and say, "We will not bow." And here's the mystery: the miracle didn't happen outside the furnace. It happened inside. The presence of the fourth man was revealed only when they walked through the fire. That means the very trial you fear might be the stage for the greatest revelation of God in your life. So remember this: faith doesn't always keep you out of the fire, but it will keep you through it. Deliverance doesn't always come before the furnace, but it will surely come in the midst of it. And the God who walked with the Hebrew boys is the same God who walks with you today. If this story stirred your spirit, share your thoughts below. Tell me, have you ever faced a fiery furnace moment where you felt pressured to bow but chose to stand? I'd love to hear your testimony, because your story might inspire someone else who feels alone in their fire right now. And before you leave, remember, like, share, and subscribe so that this message of unshakable faith can reach more people who need to know that the fourth man is still in the fire. You are not alone. You never were. You never will be.